Wandering Chronicler. That's me. WYC for short. I'd never been hired for a job like this before. Not until a certain Lieutenant Zak Zimmer of the Rangers sought me out. He had a mission, one involving an abandoned bunker in the far southern reaches of the island, in the notorious Z3 sector. He said he needed someone to document the event, and, well, that's where I come in. Apparently, it was meant to be a straightforward job, but I should have known nothing on this cursed island ever goes as planned. Zach had promised we'd leave quickly, but that quickly changed. I scrambled to gather my supplies, a trusty notebook, an absurd number of pens, as you learn to have spares when you end up crawling through puppet-infested death corridors, and whatever meals I could fit in my pack. The Ranger was known for constantly changing plans, which meant I had to be ready for anything at any moment. Just as I thought we were leaving, Zach decided to double-check something, then changed his mind again. Finally, after what felt like endless moments of indecision, his truck rumbled up, the roar of its engine demanding urgency. "Come on, Chronicler, we're late!" Zach shouted. "Well, whose fault is that, Ranger?" I shot back, rolling my eyes. "You're the one who kept changing the plan every 5 minutes." I hopped into the bed of his truck, fumbling with my pens and trying to get comfortable amid a jumble of crates and gear. I didn't think twice about the lack of seatbelts. I was too focused on making sure none of my pens would roll away during what was sure to be a bumpy ride. And bumpy would be an understatement. "Holy hell, Ranger! Are you sure you're supposed to drive like this?" I yelled over the sound of the engine straining as we bounced over another hill. Zach shot me a grin over his shoulder. "Relax, Chronicler. You haven't lived until you've taken a truck airborne." He said this just before slamming on the gas, launching us over yet another mound of earth. "I prefer living with all my internal organs in their original places," I muttered, and screamed more like it, gripping onto the side for dear life. We hadn't even reached the outskirts of the lost city in B2 before I realized that Zak Zimmer was either the worst driver on the island or the most distracted one. He handled the truck like it was an off-road stunt car, driving over hills, swerving wildly, and attempting to crush tree stumps beneath the wheels as if they were inconsequential twigs. "Watch out for that!" I began, but it was too late. The truck hit something. A rock, a stump, maybe a phantom from the island's twisted past, and we went careening to the side. It wasn't until our second crash that I started to genuinely reconsider my life choices. The first was bad, a wild jolt that threw me against the truck's side. The second, though, defied physics. Zach somehow managed to perform a quadruple barrel roll, which ended with an explosion that took out the front passenger tire. I can't quite explain what happened after. My skull had an intimate meeting with the back window, my brain rattled, and everything blurred for a second or 10. I awoke to find myself staggering out of the back of the truck, legs wobbling like they were made of jelly, and promptly threw up into a bush. Zach approached, rubbing the back of his head. Are you good, Chronicler? You look like you took quite a hit there." He seemed genuinely concerned, which was a nice change from his usual adrenaline junkie demeanor. Note to self," I mumbled to myself, barely audible over the noise of Zach's tire replacement. "Next mission. Insist insist on sitting inside the vehicle with a seatbelt. Hurry up and help me with these crates while I finish up," Zach added, clearly having missed my comment. I rolled my eyes, but moved to assist, knowing we weren't getting out of there without teamwork. I sighed, mostly to myself. Yeah, almost there. After the impromptu repair, all for the lore, right? I muttered, trying to push away the growing unease and focus on the task ahead. Zak grinned and turned his attention back to the truck, starting to replace the destroyed tire with one from the truck's inventory. The way he moved, with the ease of someone who had done this far too many times, it made it clear this wasn't exactly an uncommon occurrence. I watched him, my anxiety rising again as he nonchalantly twisted the bolts. After what felt like a lifetime, we made it to Z3, or nearly there. Zak drove right past the bunker, oblivious to our objective, until I hollered for him to stop. Zak! Bunker! You just passed it! Zak slammed on the brakes, his truck skidding to a halt. He looked back at me, bewildered, before sheepishly nodding. Right. Just testing your observational skills, Chronicler. Good job. At this point, I was beginning to think that the island's lore either had a very twisted sense of humor or was trying to teach me something about appreciating life. Eventually, we arrived, and Zak's demeanor shifted. The bumbling, stunt-driving daredevil vanished, replaced by a focused professional. He gestured for me to follow him up a small incline, the bunker's entrance looming just beyond. We climbed up to a vantage point, listening to the echo of voices coming from below. The ranger looked tense, whispering to me about how the mission had already gone off script. Broadcasts on the island's radios had compromised our plans, and who knew what hostile ears might be listening in. Well, we're walking into a mess, Chronicler. Eyes open, ears sharper, Zak said, his voice low. His playful tone was gone, replaced by something steely. Lucky for us, the voices weren't enemies. They were allies, other rangers and friends. Victoria Wallace, Kendra Barlow, and Zak's comrade, Lieutenant Evo, were waiting near the entrance. They were armed to the teeth, rifles on their backs, sidearms on their hips, and quivers packed with arrows. There I was, standing proudly in my beloved bunny slippers, more cherished than any other piece of clothing I owned, save my wolf hat and my bow, wondering what I had signed up for. Look who finally decided to show up, Kendra said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Zak shot her a grin. Miss me that much, huh? Well, relax. We brought the Chronicler. We're good. Victoria eyed me, her gaze flicking down to the bunny slippers and then back up. You sure about that? I shrugged, holding up my notebook. Hey, I'm here to record, not impress. Lieutenant Evo shook his head, chuckling. Let's get moving before the entire island knows we're here. After some quick discussion, I handed Zak the Z3 bunker keycard, which, by some miracle, I had thought to bring. The heavy metal doors creaked open and the atmosphere shifted. The chatter died away, replaced by a heavy silence. Kendra, always the serious one, gave a whisper that carried more weight than a shout. Silence from here on out. Nothing beyond a whisper. We nodded in agreement. Even Victoria, who usually filled silence with pious prayers to her Lord, was quiet now, her mouth moving wordlessly. The bunker sloped downwards, the narrow pathway ahead barely visible in the dim, flickering lights. The air was heavy, oppressive, like the place itself resented our intrusion. I could hear the rattling of old machinery, the hum of long-forgotten fans still trying to push the stale air. We moved cautiously, our footsteps muffled on the cold metal and concrete floor. My bunny slippers, at least, made next to no sound, though I couldn't say the same for my heartbeat thundering in my ears. Stopped us in our tracks, a sound that didn't belong. It wasn't machinery, nor the ambient creaks of the old bunker settling. It was crying. The faint, unmistakable cry of an infant, echoing from somewhere deeper within. "What the hell?" Victoria whispered, her face paling. I glanced at the others, but they were frozen, eyes locked on a vent above my head. Zak gave a quick, almost imperceptible nod, and I stepped back instinctively, positioning myself near a stack of crates covered by a tarp. Everybody, bows ready, Zak murmured, his voice barely audible. I readied my bow, pulling an arrow from my quiver and knocking it silently. My instincts screamed at me. Something was coming. The noise grew louder. There was a sudden metallic screech, a vent giving way. I looked up just in time to see something. Something made of flesh and metal, something twisted and filled with hatred, fall from the ceiling, landing with a sickening thud right in front of us. Its eyes, if they could be called that, glowed with a malice that seemed to drink in the dim light. "Hold," Zak whispered, his voice steady as he drew his bowstring. It was Kendra who spoke first, her eyes narrowing as she focused on the creature. "Wait for it to move." The creature shifted, its head turning towards us, emitting a guttural noise that made my skin crawl. There was no more waiting. Zak let loose an arrow, the twang of the bowstring almost comforting in its familiarity. The bow went loose. The arrow flew true, striking the creature in its shoulder. It howled, a terrible, ear-splitting sound that echoed through the confined space of the bunker. "Take it down! Take it down!" Evo barked, his voice still barely above a whisper, gradually rising to a scream and bark. The rest of us let our arrows fly, each shot precise, each one finding its mark. I had never needed more than 2 arrows for anything smaller than a bear. Yet, this thing was still standing, hatred burning in its eyes even after all of our arrows had struck it. Time seemed to slow down, and in those few seconds, my senses became painfully sharp. I could see every tremor in its grotesque form, hear the sharp intake of breath from Victoria beside me, feel the pressure building as each heartbeat seemed to last an eternity. Shocked, I watched as the creature took almost an entire second volley of arrows from the party, its body jerking with each impact, refusing to fall. It was only as we let loose that final shot that I saw it lurch forward. For a terrifying moment, I thought it might have reached us, those horrific blades, twisted and cruel, ready to strike. But then, with a final shudder, the creature fell to its knees, collapsing entirely, the eerie glow in its eyes flickering before fading out. The whole scene had unfolded in mere seconds, but it had felt like a lifetime, a masterful, traumatizing dance between life and death. For a moment, there was nothing but silence, the echoes of the fight fading away. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding, my heart pounding in my ears. "Good work," Zak finally said, his voice calm but tense. "Let's move. There's more where that came from. I can feel it." I nodded, swallowing hard as I looked at the others. They were all focused, ready. I took a deep breath, adjusted my bunny slippers, and said, "I'm good." Whatever horror the island had in store for us, it had just begun. And I was here to chronicle it all. End of chapter 1.